Hey listeners, this episode was recorded before Ray changed his name. We refer to him as Jammy in this episode, but the show notes and such refer to him as Ray, and so should you. Hello and welcome to the Gauntlet podcast. This is our year-end, year-beginning favorite game of the year recording that we do each year. This one is for 2021. Yeah, so that was a year. Huh. How about that? Thoughts on gaming this year? Any thoughts? David, I know you had to move at one point.
Yeah, I'm still struggling to decide whether this last year feels like 3 years or 3 months, because I think it's both, which is an odd situation to be in. Yeah, no, I've moved house, not very far, but that disrupted a bit of my gaming over the summer, but still got some great stuff played. I've been playing some brilliant games, all told. Very difficult to pick out any singular favourites, but I think there was one that probably people who have spoken to me about role-playing games in the past few months will probably be guessing already, but we'll get to that in a moment.
Shane, you are in the lockdown land. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, not anymore. We're out of lockdown now. Melbourne did have the world's longest sort of cumulative lockdown. We hit that point sometime this year. We're free again. But, you know, I mean, on the plus side, that did make for a lot of extra time for gaming, which I have taken full advantage of.
And that is good. And Jamie, your work this year has been a lot of playtesting for a lot of very cool things.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about it a little bit, but one of the games I'm working on, we had in total across 3 groups, 50 sessions on the Gauntlet. So thank you very much, Gauntlet. I really appreciate all the help.
And Sherry, who all of your vacation time got pushed back to the very end of the year.
Yes. I took, I think, 3.5 weeks of my 5 weeks of vacation in December. So there you go. And you know what? I haven't taken a full day of vacation. Actually, I've been on the phone. I've been getting calls. So It's really just the same thing. So maybe no vacation. But in between, I played a few games.
That is good. So listeners, we are going to each go through our picks. And then in between, you're going to hear some picks from community members. We've got a lot of different voices and a lot of different picks from people. Now, I do want to qualify, this is not necessarily a game that came out this year. People are picking their favorite game that they experienced, encountered, however they engaged with it this year, whatever they dug the most. So, let's go into it. David, tell us about your picks.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, it has been a very, very good year for games. I've played a lot of really good fun stuff. Though actually, funnily enough, most of the games I'm actually going to mention today are ones that I have previously spoken about in my individual submissions to this podcast. So I will be retreading over a bit of old ground for those who are regular listeners. And I will say this is also one of my absolute favourite Gauntlet podcast episodes of the year. I always look forward to hearing from everyone. So it's really great to be on a slightly different bit of the microphone, maybe. I don't know quite how to phrase that. I'll start off. There's a couple of games that are probably not really in contention for my favourite game of the year for reasons aside from their quality as games. I did just want to give a big congratulations to Lowell. Thankfully, due to the vagaries of international freight, we have here in Europe received our physical copies of Hearts of Wulin. I know.
Same in the Philippines.
Thank God.
Yay.
Not us.
So
I'm so happy.
Yes, yeah.
Relieved, rather.
And this has absolutely been one of my favourite games just of a while. I've actually not played much of it in this year, which is largely why it's kind of not in the runnings as such. But I think it still remains the PBTA game I have run the most sessions of, with, I think, possible contest for that spot with one of the other games I'd like to mention, which is Shattered City by Mina Mcjanda, which I haven't, again, I've not actually, I kind of ended the campaign of it I was running towards the beginning of this year, end of last year, I actually forget which, but that's been a really good fun game. That's a game that I played with friends, started off playing face-to-face, before the recent events, which moved to an online game. We played it fairly slow paced, but we had a very good, fun campaign of that, and I enjoyed that immensely. It was great fun to play with both the game itself and with friends. Again, as I said, mostly winding it up this year. Also, we were still kind of playing the playtest version at that point, so still kind of falls out of my category for favourite game of the year. And I do also want to give a big shout out to Jammies, The Twilight Throne and the Houses of Ruin, of which I'm sure we'll be hearing more over the course of this episode. Again, I've played a lot of that this year. I've been in a couple of playtest campaigns.
Yeah, David's been in 2 of the playtest groups. Thank you, David.
Indeed. But again, as the game's not yet out there, I'll kind of leave my thoughts on that for the time being, and maybe we'll see this time next year. But the 2 that sort of in hot contest for my final pick were Bite Marks by Becky Anderson. You will have heard me speak about on the podcast before. It's an amazing game. I love the character dynamics in it. I love the way it plays with the drama of the setting, the relationship dynamics between the characters. All of that is really, really good. It's a very powerful game. I also, again, spoken briefly about this before, but I ran a session right at the very beginning of the year, doing it as a book club where it was inspired by one of my favourite comfort gay werewolf novels. So that was a whole lot of fun. The other that I have really enjoyed is Tales from the Locanthraphs, which is an excellent PBTA game that's sort of set in that young adult children's fantasy type world. Certainly at the time, I had been looking for a game that did the exact things that this game does for a long time and been surprised that there wasn't one out there. I think this really nails that young adult tone. Again, I spoke in more detail about this earlier in the year, so I won't go into a huge spiel on it now. I don't wish to get onto Rich's naughty list again. But again, excellent game. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this develops once we get sort of closer to a final form of it. And I've been enjoying the playtesting of it I've done so far. But my pick for game of the year is The Between by Jason Cordova, which was actually one of the very first games I played on the Gauntlet back at Gauntlet Con in 2018, if memory serves. We played a 3-night, 3-shot play through of it over the con. This was obviously back when it was still in its playtest days, before we got sort of the final form of it that we see today. This was also, I believe, my pick for favourite game of the year in 2018. So another returning contestant. But so why I've chosen this. So again, I'm not going to speak a lot about the mechanical side of things, about how the game works, how the game plays. I think that the game's been covered quite a bit on the podcast already. What I'm going to talk about more is sort of why it is my favourite game of the year. I'll give the very brief intro spiel, which is obviously it's a game of gothic monster hunters in Victorian London. It plays very heavily into the sort of dark and sexy tone of Penny Dreadful as the primary inspiration of that sort of gothic horror vibe in general. The reasons that I really like it, for a start, I really enjoy that aesthetic. Appeals to me a lot. I think the very first D&D game I ran was using the old Mask of the Red Death box set for AD&D, just to get my chops in there. But I think that is one of the things I really like about it, is both the aesthetic, but also the way the game itself supports that aesthetic. And that even if it's maybe not something that comes as naturally to you, it helps you to build up that kind of deep, rich tone, the internal horror and the like, which I think works out really nicely. So that's one of the big reasons I really like it. I love the stories all of the playbooks tell. They're all very recognisable archetypes, but they play out in a very individual kind of way, which I think is great. I've seen every one of them played in slightly different ways. I love the way it plays with success and failure. I love the fact that you can really feel like going in for risky stuff without feeling like you're going to get punished for it, or sometimes thinking that the punishment would be really, really good. So that's absolutely something I like for it. I've also been doing a bit of writing for it, which has been really good. I find the way that Jason has sort of set up the threat structure just really, really gels nicely with the way my brain works for writing. Just being able to hit those like high points and key points for it is Absolutely awesome. There's also, I will admit, an element of catharsis to playing the game as well. The criticism of Victorian society is something that is feeling increasingly necessary in Britain of the modern day. So that it has been very cathartic on that sense as well. As people who have read some of the stuff I've written for it might be able to just get the teeniest trace of a hint in there. But yeah, that is my game of the year. If you haven't checked it out yet, please do go and do that, and all of the other games I've mentioned as well.
Awesome. Listeners, we are now going to hear from some of our community members.
Hi, this is Donna, long-time listener, first-time caller. I expect to have played about 70 different RPGs by the end of the year, and picking just one favorite is a bit of a push, but here are some honorable mentions to placate my conscience. In a campaign, Balak Bayan Returning Home by our very own Jamila Najadi. As a one-shot-ish tension, a queer cat and mouse romp for two by Dear Slattery, and as a duet last year by MV. But top spot this year has got to be Alice is Missing. I usually don't play one-shot games so many times, but I've gotten this to the table 6 times this year, with another one on the calendar. The texting-only format is unusual, but incredibly and surprisingly immersive. The prompts are evocative enough to draw you in, but leave you enough room for maneuver, for replayability. That said, I'm anticipating the rumored expansion to mix things up a little. Safety is emphasized during the entire text of the rules, including a lengthy debriefing procedure, and that's necessary because this game will be an intense and emotive experience for you. Highly recommended, and I'm looking forward to putting a twist on it in the new year as I use it to springboard into a run of Monster Hearts 2. Wish everyone a good holiday and Happy New Year, and looking forward to playing with you all soon.
Hello everyone, this is Thomas Manuel, writer of the Indie RPG newsletter and game designer from Chennai, India. I had 3 amazing games this year that I wanted to highlight. They're all kind of Forged in the Dark games. I think that's my shtick, but they're like very different Forged in the Dark games. The first one I want to point out is Girl by Moonlight, Forged in the Dark game by Andrew Gillis about magical girls. It is an amazing game. It's a very emotional Forged in the Dark game. I think it's going to be like super influential when it comes out because it's not yet out. I played the beta, the playtest packet. I think it's coming out from Evil Hat sometime soon, maybe next year. I don't know. But whenever it does, everyone should check it out. The second game is The Twilight Throne by Jamila Najadi Jamie. It's already like influenced by Girl by Moonlight, but it is a spectacular like social political intrigue game about like, it's like a dark fae Game of Thrones. And I had like a fantastic campaign of it run by Leandro on the Gauntlet, and that was amazing. Some of the greatest gaming I've ever done in my life. I highly recommend that game when it comes out because it also is in playtest and is not really actually like available. My favorite game of the year, which you can buy right now, is Crash Kart by Galen. Crash Kart is a Forged in the Dark game that uses cards instead of dice. It's like a very cool mechanical change. It's a game about EMTs in a kind of like near future dystopia where healthcare has been completely privatized, and what you do every kind of session, it's a one-shot game, and what you do kind of every session is you go out to a patient who needs you and you get the patient and then you take them to the hospital that they're supposed to go to, and that's it. Like that's the mission every time, and it's super neat. I think cards change the game in a very interesting way, in a very kind of like fun way, while still like very clearly being Forged in the Dark. I recommend everyone kind of check that out, and I'm very excited to see games inspired by these 3 Forged in the Dark designs coming in the future.
Hello, I'm David MK, pronouns he, him, and I have 3 games I'd like to talk about. And my number 1 game of the year is the suspenseful Against the Dark Conspiracy by Alan Reese. It's a supernatural thriller tabletop role-playing game, and my favorite supernatural spy RPG to date. Let me tell you why that is. The risk is part of the story and backed up with the mechanics. The setting is important and feels like a character. The supernatural is dangerous and exciting. Collaborative mission and conspiracy building. You play competent, motivated, and interrelated characters. If you like these kinds of things all in one role-playing game, then I recommend you try Against the Dark Conspiracy. My number 2 game of the year is the versatile modular Cortex Prime by Cam Banks and Fandom. I've been using it to create and playtest a number of my own games in development, such as Space Station Omega, and most recently with Eternity, an RPG about transcendental intrigue and adventure, and Found, an RPG about belonging through shared consciousness conspiracies. My number 3 game of the year is the epic Aegon by John Harper and Sean Nittner, which I was glad to finally try out this year. Aegon is an RPG of mythic heroes that emulates epic poems of ancient Greek heroes and their exploits. And those are my games for the Gauntlet Community 2021.
Hi, this is Will, and my choice for 2021 is a game of Knights Black Agents that we've run ironically without ever using the core NBA system. Instead, we've been using a NBA Express hack that Lowell made and Alan Reese's game of Against the Dark Conspiracy. But I'm not really talking about the systems here, although both have been incredibly enjoyable. I'm talking about the sort of shared little world, the continuing story that we've played across both of these things. I think it's really a great example of how wonderful playing on the Gauntlet is and how just interesting you can get with role-playing games. I can't think of a better experience for investigation in role-playing games than this. I have this mirror board that I've turned into a huge conspiracy board that has just grown and grown from our very first encounter onto this sprawling web of shadowy Orphic vampire conspiracies that are fighting the Dracula bloodlines for domination of the world and have webbed their way into MI5 and MI6, and then they're trying to track down Van Helsing's bloodlines, and how does it all fit together? We'll probably never know. And that's perfect, because every thread that we leave dangling is another route into a game. So Lowell did an incredible job of adapting all of the published materials, such as the Dracula dossier, the Persephone extraction, the Dubai connection, and that was just an incredible series. It was easily my landmark from the second that we played that game. It was going to be my choice for this year. But then since then, we've continued with Alan's Against the Dark Conspiracy, and the spontaneously generated structure of that has made it really good for just building off all of that published material and existing content. In really true spy investigation fashion, we just take a loose thread and then we go down and see how far it goes. We create another 3 episodes of that, sometimes involving whole new players, and everyone just gets a little fraction of the picture, apart from me, of course, who is exhaustingly enthusiastic about the whole thing and maintains this ridiculous Miro board of interconnected webs. It's just been really special. I love it so much, and I look forward to playing more of it, and I'm just so thankful to everyone who helped make this happen.
Hi, my name is Mike Ferdinando, and I've been a member of the Gauntlet for about 3 years now. When thinking about my favorite game of the year, I just couldn't settle on a single game, so instead I'm going to talk about 2 related games, Trophy Dark and Trophy Gold, both designed by Jesse Ross. Trophy has become my absolute favorite role-playing game to GM. At its heart, Trophy is a collaborative storytelling game, where the game mechanics provide a space and opportunity for the players and the GM to build a compelling narrative together. When I GM a game of Trophy, I may know the broad stroke outline of what I've planned, but I never know just how it's going to play out or what the ending is going to look like. And I find this aspect of the game to be a real joy. So much of that comes from Jesse's brilliant design. The system's push-your-luck dice mechanics are constantly nudging the players to add new elements to the story. And at the same time, player consent is baked right into the rules. Ultimately, it's the players who get to choose exactly what horrific things happen to their character. And as a GM, I regularly find myself just sitting back and going along for the ride. On the Gauntlet this past year, I ran 3 consecutive 4-session series of Trophy Gold with an overlapping cast of characters. The incursions I ran were Hester's Mill by Jason Cordova, plus my own conversions of The Death Ziggurat by Carl Niblaeus, originally written for Mork Borg, and The God's Mouth Heresy by Rob McCreary, originally written for Pathfinder. The series was the first time I got to use the Hearthfire downtime rules, so we got to see several of the characters change and develop over time. I just loved how Hearthfire is very much an advancement system, but without the characters actually getting more powerful. Their stories get more interesting, and the characters themselves just get weirder over time. I love that. This year, I also ran several one-shots of Trophy Dark, both here on the Gauntlet and also with Magpie Games community play. And while I did run several sessions in total, I only used 2 different incursions this year, Jim Crocker's The Flocculent Cathedral and my own Isle of Water and Blood, which I hope to publish before the end of the year. What I love about Dark is seeing how differently the same incursion can play out, and also how players really embrace the end of their characters' stories. Plus, this year I finally got to experience Trophy Dark as a player, as I got into a game run by Jason Cordova. I got to play a treacherous sorcerer who was undone by his own hubris. It was a delight. So, Trophy Dark and Trophy Gold are tied for my 2021 Game of the Year.
Hi everyone, my name is Jose, and I am a relative newbie to the Gauntlet, having only started playing with you all in March of this year. So my pick for Game of the Year is from a very limited sample, since I don't have a lot of experience with TTRPGs before this year. And my pick is Monster Hearts, which of course is a game that's very familiar to most of you. So I won't be saying anything new about it, but I thought I'd share just a little bit about my experience of it. I have been so impressed by the simple elegance of the mechanics of this game, the playbooks and the moves. I'm sure that others can speak more intelligently to why the mechanics work as well as they do. So I'll just speak a little bit about my own experience of the game. I felt like the way the game was structured, it managed to nurture my capacity to tell a compelling story, and to tell it in the most collaborative way I could have ever imagined. I tend to be a little bit of a pre-planner and figure things out in advance, so leaning into improvisation is always a challenge for me, but one that I really enjoy. So this game really inspired me to let go of the reins and to keep the story feral and let it go in unpredictable directions. So much so that whenever a roll came up in the game, I can honestly say I did not care how the roll came up, whether it was a failure or a success with cost, because I knew, I had faith that it was going to lead to some great storytelling no matter what happened. And I'm very thankful for that. So I'm thankful for Monster Hearts, and on this day after Thanksgiving when I'm recording this, I'm thankful for having found the Gauntlet community. That's my pick for Game of the Year.
Hello, my name is Steph, better known as Chaotic. My Game of the Year is The Between. It is a Victorian Monster Hunter mystery game. The reason why it's my Game of the Year is because it's just a very good mystery system. Brenda Woodbay may have done it first, but like the expansion and the ideas that went into The Between are just so very good. It allows for better arcs, better long-term play, and just more structure in how you resolve things within the system.
And we're back. All right. Our second person who is going to be giving us our picks is Shane. Tell us what your fave was.
Well, let me start by saying that trying to decide what my favorite game was this year, what games I would talk about on the show today, really brought out my Libra moon. I have just agonized over this decision. Really like literally minutes before we started this recording, I was still shuffling things around, trying to decide what I would talk about, what I wouldn't, how much time, all these things. But I should actually get into my list, I guess. I have a few honorable mentions to go through quickly before I get to my fave. So, honorable mentions. First, I want to mention Visigoths vs. Morgoths. This was by far the most straight-up just fun game that I played this year. It's a role-playing game and dating sim about rival goth factions battling for control of a 90s shopping mall, and the mall itself is keyed like a dungeon crawl, like an old AD&D type product. It's just a joy to play and run. I've had an amazing time every time I've run it, and definitely the game that has produced the most laughter at the table and the loudest laughter at the table of anything that I've had a chance to play this year. Another honourable mention is the game that I've enjoyed the most as a player but haven't actually gotten to run yet. That is Hearts of Wulin. Thanks to Jim Crocker and David S. for running some fantastic games that I got to play in. I stole entanglements from this for my lesbian cheerleading game, where it worked great. I really see myself stealing more bits of this game for other games that I'm running for years to come. And I'm really excited now that, as David mentioned, now that I have my beautiful hardback copy, really excited to run the game myself next year. Honourable mention to Apocalypse Keys. I loved the way in this game it always felt like the right choice as a player or the GM was just to go for the biggest, most over-the-top option possible. The subtlety was never the right choice. And that was super exciting to me. I really loved the way that it played. I love the idea of very powerful characters who are only limited by their own horrible emotional problems. So that was just really fun for me to run. I'm super excited to see where it goes from here. And I also want to mention, as my last honourable mention, Mcjanda. I got to play in just the second part of a two-shot that Ben Bisogno ran on the Gauntlet. Obviously, jumping in halfway through a game like that isn't the ideal way to experience it, but it was still just so powerful and full of fun and delight. I'm really excited to see how they continue to develop that.
Agreed.
And to get a chance to play a whole game one day. So those are my honourable mentions. I have two games that have been basically the contenders for my game of the year. And I've known for like weeks now that one of these two would be the top one, and just shuffling them back and forth, unable to decide. If we'd recorded this a few hours later, it might have fallen the other way. But my runner-up for game of the year, David's already talked about this, but it has to be The Between. Every session of this that I ran was a joy. Similar to what David was saying about tone, I just really appreciate how much support it gives to everyone at the table, the players and GMs both, just to constantly be like exciting and awesome for each other. I think it does a really great job of engendering these awesome moments at the gaming table. When I think back to what are the most memorable moments in games that I played this year, so many of them come from The Between. I think about the time that Gabe's the American woke up strapped into a guillotine with the blade hanging over his neck. I think about the time, Jamie, that your Dr. Malik was trying to animate the child after spending the entire campaign desperately assembling body parts. I don't know if I've ever seen anyone more excited and nervous about a single die roll than you looked.
I know. I thought I was going to die at that moment.
The single most exciting gaming moment of the year for me, which still really stands out as a memory, was Blake Ryan's vessel, Helena, facing off with the vicious killer, Sally No Face. Facing off, sorry, no pun intended there. Who had come to slice off Helena's lover's face. And Blake just revealed suddenly that, in fact, Sally No Face was his character's sister. And just this great soap opera revelation that had so much drama and excitement to it was such a surprise swerve for me as the Game Master. I thought that was not only exciting in itself, but a really great illustration of what's great about The Between, and also what's more broadly great about the Gauntlet and the kind of collaborative approach to games that a lot of players and GMs take here. So yeah, the Between is an absolutely fantastic game. I cannot recommend it highly enough, and that will be my runner-up for Game of the Year. So that brings me to my favourite game of the year. In a crowded field, I'm going to say that my favourite game of the year is #iHunt by Olivia Hill and Philomena Young. People probably know, but it's a Fate-based game. The core version is about this Uber-style app for monster hunting gigs. It's a satirical, sort of anti-capitalist horror game with a very strong thread of social criticism running through it. I got to play earlier in the year in a couple of sessions that you ran, Lol, and that was really fun. But what put this right at the top for me is the game, or the publisher, has a Patreon where they publish a monthly zine of bonus material. This year, that's focused largely on alternate settings, historical settings through the 20th century, the 30s, the 50s, the 80s. I don't think I'm quite ready to acknowledge that the 90s is an era that people have nostalgia for yet, but that was also possibly in there. The historical setting material is like an odd choice in some ways, but I think it was so smart. The core game trades so heavily in memes and social media, the gig economy, all these things that are really hyper-contemporary in their focus. And that works really great. It's a dynamite, exciting game in itself. They're a huge part of the game's appeal. But the way those zines showed that the game isn't just about the present, I think was really smart. iHunt is a documentary, but the idea of these hard luck, working class monster hunters desperately trying to make a living just has a lot of directions that you can take it in that aren't immediately obvious as you read that core game. And I think that really expanded and deepened the social critique that the game has, while also just making for such fun games. The series I ran in the 80s setting, the characters fought this kind of evil 80s real estate lawyer, Freddy Krueger, nightmare murderer, trying to get a good deal on some land he wanted to turn into condos. I just had so much fun bouncing around these 80s horror movie references. I have to say thanks to Will H for catching, a lot of those. I don't think anyone could catch all of my 80s horror references. But also just so fun to bounce back and forth between supernatural horror and the mundane or economic horrors of office politics, your mother's mortgage, the evil coffee chain that's going to put you out of business, all of these things. Mechanics-wise, I really enjoyed the actual Fate-type rules. I hadn't really played Fate before. And I think that the parts that iHunt specifically adds to Fate, things like the edge dice and the ways you can imperil aspects, do a great job both in adding excitement to the game itself, but also adding some mechanical weight to the themes that it brings. Super excited to run this more next year. I definitely want to run the core version. I definitely want to run more 80s stuff, especially because I've been watching the Phantasm series, so I have some more inspiration to bring back to the table. The 30s one sounds really fun to me as well. I know there's a zine of alternative rules to run it as a rom-com, which I am super excited to try out. So definitely look to see me putting this on the calendar a bunch next year.
Awesome. Yeah, iHunt's great. And the additional material, I bought the POD versions of some of those collections.
I'm still getting over the rom-com alternative stuff. I have to look into that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Shane, I may have to invite myself to that.
Oh, please.
Listeners, we're going to hear from some more of our community members and then come back.
Hi there, this is Tyler Lominack, and my game of the year is Spire, The City Must Fall by Grant Howitt and Christopher Taylor. I've run quite a bit of it this year, and I find it has one of the best settings. It's massive and greatly detailed. It is creepy. It is dark. It brings the players into this revolution, fight against the powers that be, while trying to build up their own communities and to make their world a little bit better place, while at the same time putting them into some pretty dark situations where they have to sometimes choose the lesser of two evils. The playbooks are amazing for it. The classes just fantastic, different, unusual, and I have had a blast running it.
Hello, Gauntlet community. This is Mario Salamander, and I want to talk about the most exciting game I've played in 2021. But as so many others of you, first I have to mention some games I think were system-wise way better than my actual mention, which would be Hearts of Berlin, Trophy, and Brindlewood Bay. But, and I think that is because at first I wasn't really convinced by the system, even though it was PBTA, which is something I usually love. And it's Pasión de las Pasiones. I had some issue with the moves at first. Also with the setting, which first of all I wasn't too familiar with, and then there was a lot I wasn't sure about, because these specific telenovela stories looked like they would only sing when you have someone that is actually writing a plot. And I still think it's not as solid as other PBTA systems, but the thing is, I played it on Gauntlet and I had the most wonderful group doing so, and the game was run by Puckett. So we've been playing this for over a year now, on and off, basically every other month. I think we had 7 seasons that we were playing over the course of a month. And basically it was the wildest story. Puckett came up with a supernatural setting for Pasión de las Pasiones. So we played witches and vampires and shapeshifters and whatever, like vampire hunters, monster hunters. Crazy stuff with crazy moves that Puckett designed especially for us, because he came up with even more playbooks during play. And we had, oh man, there was so much going on in that story. We had a lot of colonialism. We had drug issues. We had mafia-related storylines. We had to rescue a child. It was a lot about family legacy, and there was a lot of really grim stuff in it, but it always felt right and dramatic and not just screaming for attention because it's like an edgy topic probably, or a problematic topic to deal with in role-playing games. But the group and the characters were really heavily invested, and their life really changed with however we dealt with those topics. So that was something I did not see coming at all. That was a huge surprise for me when playing it. And so I have to thank everybody in that group for such an amazing experience. And now it's a game where I'm really anxious about getting it to the table myself, because I just don't think I would ever come anywhere close to the story of that group. So you all know, if you played in that group, I love you all, and it was so much fun to play with you, and I can't wait to see you back in the new year. Also, yeah, shout out to the Gauntlet for enabling such great games. Thank you, and bye.
Hello everyone, my name is Alexi Sargent. I'm a longtime Gauntlet player and GM. You can follow all of my gaming endeavors online at Cloven Pine Games, so check out my games on itch.io at Cloven Pine Games. And I am here to share my pick for Game of the Year, and my Game of the Year is Tales from the Low Cantrefs. So Tales from the Low Cantrefs is a hearth fantasy coming-of-age game. It's designed by Luke Jordan of Games from the Wildwood, and it is currently in playtesting. I got to bookend my gaming year with series of Tales from the Low Cantrefs. I ran a game using the first playtest packet back at the beginning of the year, and then I've gotten to both run and play Tales from the Low Cantrefs with the second playtest packet here in the fall, and the game is wonderful. I'll say a little bit more about how the game describes itself. It says, Tales from the Low Cantrefs is a hearth fantasy coming-of-age role-playing game powered by the apocalypse. It is a game filled with petty village politics, childhood superstitions, adults who just don't understand, strange magics, wild and ruined landscapes, monsters out of old folk tales, and the terrible responsibility of growing up. And I will say the game delivers. All of that comes through in play really well because of the game's design and because the people who seek out this game are excited about this type of fantasy, this sort of fantasy inspired by Garth Nix and Tamara Pierce and Ursula Le Guin, and I guess in some ways, most importantly, the Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander. But it is always a fun time putting together a village, creating the young people who live in it, and the troubles that confront them. On the Gauntlet, I got to play in a quarterly run by Jesse Abelman. I joined in for the second village out of 2 villages in that series, and I played Kareth the Blade, an impulsive young fisherman eager to prove his worth by wielding his father's enchanted harpoon. And we had some very exciting and emotional sessions and ended on a perfectly bittersweet note as Kareth defied prophecy, leapt in the way of a blow meant for a friend, and possibly helped to doom his village in a very slow and creeping way. So This game is really exciting, and you should get on it. Follow Luke Jordan on Twitter. Check out Games from the Wildwood and get in there for the next playtest packet for Tales from the Low Cantrefs.
My name is David, and my pick for Game of the Year is The Between. This is my top pick, not only because it's an amazing game, but because it does something new and innovative in the tabletop role-playing game space. And that's usually a criteria I like to have for my pick for Game of the Year. The innovative thing that it does, that I haven't seen any other game do, is the thing called the Unseen. The Unseen is part timer and part storytelling. What I mean when I say it's part timer is it regulates how long the night phase goes by limiting the number of scenes. What I mean by it's part storytelling is it allows the players to co-create the world of London that The Between is set in with the GM by answering these prompts in a vignette-style fashion where we see these unseens about normal everyday life in London. And this is part of London that the player characters and the threats and the mastermind really have nothing to do with. They don't really ever interact with them either. So it's a good world-building tool, and I've never seen anything quite like it. It's also a great game mechanic because it rewards good storytelling for the players. How it does that is this mechanic called Echoes in the Night, where the player will get XP for their character if they incorporate small details from the unseen into the play of the night phase. And if they do that, they get that XP, and really it's just a more rich version of storytelling that we should all be like trying to do anyways, but the game incentivizes it, which is great. That's why it's my pick. I've never seen a mechanic like the Unseen. The Between is fantastic.
G'day, this is Blake Ryan. Just going to put in my Gauntlet Game of the Year. Played a bunch of really good games this year, but the one that sticks out for me was in May, Shane ran Trophy Gold, and it was really good. We went from Hester's Mill, which is sort of a farmyard, rural investigation, to Belly of the Beast, which is inside a giant sea monster. So there's a huge contrast in the two locations. The group gelled well. We kind of gave each other space, but we also assisted and complemented each other as much as possible. Like Pardo avoided combat under the guise of always looking for clues and trying to help that way, whereas my character was constantly the combat monster. So, and the other two were sort of in between. So there's a good contrast of interesting characters. We're all a bit unhinged, I think, but it was good. Every session, the devil's bargains from Shane is, this is rough. This is like a wrecking ball on a character's life. It's just so delicious. That's, really good fun all around. There was a new player. They really enjoyed it. It was such a good introduction to the Gauntlet community and Trophy.
Hello, my name's Rye, and I use he, him pronouns, and I go by Rock and Roll on the Gauntlet Slack. I would like to talk about my favorite game of the year, which was Wanderhome. I had been looking for a game that was full of positivity and light given the current situation in the world, and I found it. It was full of bumblebees and a moth male raven mail deliverer with a conscience, and we had so much fun creating NPCs, and the wonderful locations just had so much depth. We almost had more fun doing that than actually playing our characters. So if anyone is looking for an uplifting game, this is one I would definitely recommend. We had a ton of happy moments. So that is my game for 2021, and I look forward to hearing from all of you.
Hi, this is Horst, and my favorite game of 2021 is Stone Top by Jeremy Strandberg. Stone Top is a low fantasy PBTA game about the heroes of a tight-knit community on the edge of the known world. The game has two major elements to it. On the one hand, you're portraying the ordinary life of an Iron Age village, the relationship between characters and the other inhabitants of Stone Top and their struggles. On the other hand, you play out adventures that lead the heroes away from the village, either to address a threat to Stone Top or to seize an opportunity for the community to flourish. I love the game because of the care and attention to detail that went into designing Stone Top. The book comes in 2 volumes, the rule set, which is full of GMing advice and actual play examples, and a setting guide that features places and monsters, magic artifacts and other helpful tools. Stonetop is designed with table play in mind and is obviously informed by countless hours of playing Dungeon World and playtesting the game. I'll be damned if I won't put a big-ass campaign of Stonetop on the Gauntlet calendar once the final product comes out somewhere in 2022.
And we're back. Jammy, what was your favorite game of the year this year?
This year was interesting because I told myself, well, for various health reasons, I have to take a break and not play as much. But when I was reviewing how many games I played with Sherry before this recording, I was like, oh, I still got quite a lot. It was hard to come up with this list. I will have to say there were so many that I couldn't include. And I know I already cheated in this list by having several best personal categories. I want to start with best shared narrative, and I'm cheating right out of the gate because there are 3 games within this pick. Basically, the reason why I call it the best shared narrative is earlier this year, I wanted to experiment with having 3 different games in the same series with the same players where we all get to play different characters, but we're creating the same narrative, the same world together. And so that is with Brinkwood, Blood of Tyrants, which is mainly by Eric Bernhardt, but he works with a lot of amazing designers and writers to create a whole game together. So Brinkwood, Blood of Tyrants was my game of the year a couple of years ago, and I will honestly still be playing this game for many years to come. And so what I was doing was experimenting with playtesting and playing Brinkwood Despair and Brinkwood Refuge, which are both games I'm working on as part of the Kickstarter stretch goals for Brinkwood. And so this whole thing was just proof of concept. Can the same players play different characters across different games, and can it be cohesive? And the answer was yes, absolutely. It was a lot of fun. It was super great. I had so much fun playing characters that someone introduces their character during one game, and in another game I would make that character an NPC. I had so much fun seeing Sherry interact with her own character that I was playing. And Sherry's face is like, of course I would say that. Of course my character would say that. And it was fun, these 3 different games, but from 3 different perspectives. So Blood of Tyrants was for the action and desperate stakes as you fight off the oppression of the vampires. It feels strongly a thing as we exist in a capitalist society. I too would like to fight off the vampires. And Brinkwood Despair was about the tragedy and the original premise of the game and getting into it, while Brinkwood Refuge was very wholesome and healing, so it was really fun playing all 3. I'm done cheating for now, so the next winner for me was Best Series, and that has to go to Hearts of Wulin, Academy of the Blade. I got to be in 2 different Academy of the Blade series this year. They were both absolutely excellent. I also, too, have the hardcover copy with me. I love it so much. I've been reading it over and over again. It's so good. I'll be playing Hearts of Wulin for years. I just know it. It's absolutely one of my favorite games. And it's also probably one of the PPTA games I've run the most in the last few years. So it's been so much fun. And in terms of Academy of the Blade, I just really love the premise because it's inspired by Revolutionary Girl Yatena. And the setting was both fresh and familiar, being able to be in this high school setting, but it's not just high school, right? There's this weird, surreal stuff going on. It's really good. Also, big shout out to Patrick, who I played with, who knows how to hurt me very, very well. But I feel like Patrick has gotten better and better across the year in terms of hurting me. So Patrick's my favorite TTRPG boyfriend. I'll say that right now. So my next category is Best Worst Characters. This year, I really explored what is it like to play a horrible person. So a little bit of that came out in the between. I think Dr. Malik was one of my most worst person to play. When I was playing across Joel, the other players are like, oh my gosh, the 2 of you are so toxic. I can't stop watching. And so that came out a lot in this category. So I chose The Twilight Throne and The Houses of Ruin, which is very self-indulgent. It's a game I'm working on. It's the one I said that we've had 50 sessions so far. here in the Gauntlet. We still have one group continuing next year. Thank you so much. Sherry's part of that group and David's part of that group. Thank you. Thank you. A huge shout out to Leandro Pondock, who offered to run the game on the Gauntlet while it was still in, it was such an early version of the game on my Patreon. And to this, I'm still working on the game, so there's no GM section, right? And Leandro did an amazing job running the game. It was absolutely stellar. Beautiful series finale, so good. Basically, for those who don't know, The Twilight Throne and the Houses of Ruin is my Forged in the Dark political social intrigue game of surreal magic and tragic intimacy. It makes Apocalypse Keys look very calm, which is saying a lot. It's a very big game. And yeah, I'll probably talk about this game a lot last year, but it was just so much fun seeing everyone play villainous or villain-leaning characters that were all complex, that had so much nuance and heart. That was, and it didn't feel mean, and it didn't feel terrible with each other, which is what I like so far about the game. That's been really, really interesting. So for my last two games, like Shane, this was like neck to neck. Like if we had recorded, I kept changing this also right before. So if we recorded this later, it might have switched around too. But okay, so for my runner-up, best mechanics is going to go to Mcjanda. How is this night different? So a lot of us have been mentioning Mcjanda for good reason. It's, I just cannot get over how it uses mechanics to create both ritual and the sense of gathering as family. And it really explores what it means when truths become myths, become legend, become comfort. And as someone who's not Jewish, someone who's completely outside of American culture as a Filipino, I still felt so welcomed. I felt so included in the game. And everyone, so I got to play a 2-shot with a few people here in the Gauntlet, and it was just, I really felt like we became family by the end of it. Like it was really, really good. And it was just, it just made me think about how we create legends, right? And how it can reflect in real life, like in historic figures like Nonoy Aquino here in the Philippines or Martin Luther King in America. And so it was so good. I love it so much. And I think they did such a good job using mechanics to create ritual and magic. I've never seen it, and I don't think I'll see it for a long time in another game. Which brings us to dun, 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 my personal game of the year, which is Alice is Missing. This is so, so good. So Spencer came to talk about this game on the Gauntlet some time ago, and I remember being really excited to play it. I finally got to play it this year. I cried so much while playing this game in a really good way. I really want to stress it was a good amount of crying. And I still think about this game a lot. We only played it once. I'm going to play it again in a few weeks, which I'm really excited about. And I still think about it. I can't get over how the elegant game design creates such a compelling and emotional experience. I was, I say I was crying. I was like ugly crying at the last part, right? I was typing. So this is a game you play silently, and I was typing into my keyboard at the computer. It was just like, oh my gosh. And it was so good. It was so good. I couldn't get over how powerful it is to have this nonverbal form of communication with other players. It felt like it really helped me just sink into the character and really fully believe what was going on. It felt almost like meditative. It felt like I was really being pulled in a way that I don't usually get to experience, in a really fun way too. And so I'll definitely playing Alice is Missing again and again and again for sure. And so I really had to make it right now at this moment my personal game of the year. But yeah, it's been a really, really good year for games. Maybe not a good year period, but a very good year for games, and I'm very grateful for that.
Fair enough. Listeners, once more, we're going to hear some more picks from the community. I have no idea if they're calling the same games as we are. It's going to be exciting to listen to this when Rich has edited it all.
I'm Agatha, and I am a member of the Gauntlet. I write games and run games, and I am also a co-host of the podcast Asians Represent. And for me, my favorite game of the year was actually one of the games that I ran on the Gauntlet, and it's Mothlight. Mothlight was mentioned in one of the Gauntlet episodes. And to reiterate, it's a dramatic science fiction game set in a post-fall civilization plagued by alien predators known as moths. And it's a Forged in a Dark game. It's really fun. The things that I loved the most about it were the fact that there was more GM guidance on how to run the games, in the form of there's like a series of prompts that you can roll every single time before players go out on missions. And on the prompts, it just gives you a guidance on troubles that will come up in there. So I feel like sometimes as a GM in Forged in the Dark games, I'm not really sure how to plan out missions and or like the parameters of the missions, like the location and like it just, there aren't tools for that really provided usually, and you kind of just have to riff on your understanding of the genre most of the time. But with Mothlight, they provided you with a scaffolding that you can choose to use or not, and I found that super great. I also love the fact that it cites Princess Mononoke as one of its touchstones, and that is basically my favorite movie ever. And to be able to play out the tone of Princess Mononoke in a tabletop role-playing game was immensely satisfying. I do have a runner-up as well. My runner-up is Volley Boys from Win Conditions, and I actually talked about it on the Gauntlet podcast, and it's still, I think, one of my favorite outside belonging or no dice no masters game. It really, again, replicates the anime tone super well of sports animes. So if that's a game that you've been thinking about, I highly recommend getting it. Both that and Mothlight.
Hi, my name is Ben Bisogno, and the game that struck me this year was a game called Vampires Suck at Shopping. This is a little one-shot role-playing game about ancient vampires who live forever and lose track of social norms in our 21st century. It's a game by James M. Hewitt and Sophie Williams. It's only 2 pages, and it's brilliant. I've run it with a number of audiences, even in my second language, and it's because the game mechanics are so simple but brilliant. It's fantastic for new players and for creating a campy, vampy vibe where you can go from very comedic to grotesque to dark and get a full adventure in 1 to 2 hours. And it's really brilliant. So check it out. Vampires Suck at Shopping.
Hello, my name is Gabrielsson, and my game of the year is Blades in the Dark. It's not a new game, far from it. It's not even new to me. But this year is the first time I've had the chance to play it for a longer period of time over multiple sessions. This has revealed to me just how slick and well designed the game is. There's nothing there that doesn't need to be there. And even though the game has many, many moving parts that connect to each other in complicated ways, there is nothing extraneous to how the game is constructed. There are no frills or bells and whistles that are unnecessary for what the game wants to do. My experience of translating it into Star Wars as Stars in the Dark has also shown that the level of abstraction is just right for reskinning. There's a lot of flavor, but the flavor is fairly easy to replace or translate into a different setting because there's very little that is tied specifically to various elements in the world where you can't find an equivalent in a different setting. So that's my game of the year. I have a runner-up in Good Society. This is the first year I've had a chance to play it, and this is also a game that shines in the longer format, where you go through several cycles of play and get to see how things play out, the characters develop, and where they're allowed to reach an interesting ending rather than maybe just play through a few scenes and get to an obvious or fairly obvious conclusion of their story arc. So those two are my games of the year.
Hey folks, it's David S., and my game of the year is one that I feel a little late to the party mentioning. It's Hearts of Wulin. Let me just start by saying I ran a lot of Hearts of Wulin this year. In total, I think I've run about 18 sessions of that game in the last probably 6 months across 4 different playgroups with 3 really diverse rule sets, including the Courtly Wuxia rule set, the Academy of the Blade anime rule set, and 4 sessions of my own Cyberpunk hack, which was incredibly fun to play. It was also the first game I had ever run on the Gauntlet calendar and at a GCOG. But aside from the personal significance the game holds for me, Hearts of Wulin really stands on its own as a game that knows how to take a genre and run with it. Every time I play Hearts of Wulin, I know I'm getting into an unbelievably high-emotion game of melodramatic twists and turns, because that is exactly what the mechanics support, especially through the entanglements system, which is perhaps the most fun mechanic I've seen in a game in years. An extra special shout-out goes to the inner conflict move, which incentivizes MCs and players both to get into situations so tense you are physically squirming in your chair, and have led to some of the best melodramatic plot twists I've ever seen on a miss. One of my favorites being the time a player made a tense backroom political deal with a rival general, only to find out that this general was actually a shape-shifting demon who had infiltrated the crown, and the player had literally just made a deal with the devil. I could talk a lot longer about this game, but to sum up, when it comes to romantic melodrama involving beautiful, larger-than-life action heroes, Hearts of Wulin has hit the nail on the head for me this year. Cheers, and Happy New Year, everybody.
My shortlist this year is a very nostalgic one, I think, because I really enjoyed running a playtest of Uncharted Worlds 2nd Edition in the Travel Universe, which is the first RPG I ever played back in 1977 or something. So really nostalgic vibes to be back in that universe. Though I think the players will agree that with hindsight, it turned into more Cowboy Bebop than Classic Traveller. I also enjoyed running the Desanction. That's my first OSR game in a very long time. OSR-ish, to be fair. But yeah, that was great. I thank the players for allowing me to indulge my enjoyment of Elizabethan England. The other thing that I think was nostalgic was that I ran a lot of Cyberpunk 2020 back in the 90s for all its weaknesses. And Daniel Kuzan ran a one-shot of Neon City Overdrive as his contribution to one of this year's game facilitator camps on the Gauntlet. And those are camps where we encourage people to come together and offer mutual support to one another to build confidence and understanding of the difference between running live and running online. And that was a fantastic session. Reminded me that I should do some more Cyberpunk stuff, I think, in the near future. All the games, in fact, in that camp were fantastic. I really enjoyed them. But I think my favorite game of the year is not one game, but a very long series. That's the sessions that Lowell Francis ran using his slight twist on Gumshoe, Knights Black Agent Express, to run the Persephone extraction. That was, I think, 15, 16 sessions all told of NBA Express. All the elegance of Gumshoe with none of the unnecessary, from my point of view, grit. And yeah, that for me, that revolves around my love of the character I played. Henrietta Michaels, burned MI6 agent, sucked back into the organization by the end of the series. It was fantastic. And the first time I've managed to get through an entire Knights Black Agents campaign and tie up nicely some of the loose ends that come out at the end of that. And the other thing was that then it gave me freedom to bring Henry back as the team handler when I ran a follow-up series of sessions of Against the Dark Conspiracy, my own homage to Knights Black Agents. So that's my game of the year. Knights Black Agents Express, run by Lowell Francis, the Persephone extraction.
Hey, this is Dan Brown. I have been with the Gauntlet for about 2.5 years. It's been a real honor and privilege to get to know the Gauntlet community and to play some amazing games with even more amazing people. 2021's been a great year. I've had a chance to try out lots of new games. I got to play in a quarterly for the first time with Lowell playing Godbound, and I got to try running Root a couple of times, and I ran Ironsworn and Starforged, all of which were really fun, and it was really great to get to know some new games and new systems. I also love being able to play test some games that I'm working on the Gauntlet. I ran several flavors of my Trust system games, including My Partner the Ghost and Team Up, which is a superheroes game, and 1,000 Quests and 100 Lifetimes, which are mismatched fantasy pairs, which was really, really great. I also got really into the Paragon system this year and ran a bunch of Paragon playsets, including Surge Projectors and Chamber. I ran 2 months of Paragon games and just had so much fun running those and really getting my hands dirty in that system. I designed a bunch of Paragon games playsets, including Ares Ascendant, about a Mars colony, and I just wrapped a fantastic set of sessions on that. I ran Rising Tide, which is a direct action eco-activism game, and I ran several sessions of that and also had a really good time running that and testing those games out. And my game of the year, and this may be very self-serving, is a game I designed in the Paragon system. It's a little one-page game called Lord, Why Have You Forsaken Me? It is based on the movie O Brother, Where Art Thou? And both O Brother, Where Art Thou and the original Paragon game, Aegon, are based on Homer's Odyssey. So I thought it was only fitting to design a game based on the movie O Brother in the Paragon system. The game itself draws a lot of cues from the movie. Players play characters who have escaped from a chain gang and are making their way to freedom. Anyway, I got to run this game for October's Gauntlet Community Open Gaming sessions and really enjoyed running that game. All 4 players were new to the Gauntlet, so it was a great way to introduce folks to playing on the Gauntlet. And we just told a really good story. We had really compelling characters, and we had a lot of fun over the course of those few hours. So, as self-serving as it might be, I'm going to say that my game of the year was Lord, Why Have You Forsaken Me?
Hello, this is Gerrit Reininghaus, calling in from Germany, Bonn. My favorite game of the year is The Bathhouse. I ran a session of The Bathhouse at one of the Gauntlet Community Open Gaming events with a fabulous crew of players, and I can tell you this game is delightful because you play it from your own bathtub. This is a live-action online game designed by Ray England, and they got an honorable mention of the Golden Cobra Award for this game, and indeed it deserves it because you just spend your time in the bathtub pretending that you take like a Roman bath together and stay in character the whole time, enjoy the beauty of the bath. Obviously this game is not with video on, but audio only, but I can highly recommend it because there isn't a more relaxed experience being imaginable than just sitting there and staying in character for like 40 minutes or so and having a good bath.
And listeners, we are back with our 4th of our 5th hosts, Sherry.
Hello.
Tell us about your pick.
Yeah, 2021, when I look back at it, I'm like, oh, I was so busy with projects, I hardly played at all. And then Jamie and I looked through them and I'm like, holy smokes, I played a lot of games. And I played a lot of games with all of you. And it makes my eyes water because it was a lot of good games. But when I tried to go to pick the best one, I have failed miserably, and I have just kind of come up with a jumbled list, and the last one is the winner, and that's just how it is. So, essentially, though, I do have a pretty good sense of my top 2. The runners-up, though, I think I have a set of 2 small light system gems that just really delivered on all cylinders, and that was Yokai Hunter Society. I absolutely enjoyed it. Every piece of text and the game itself just had the pieces that you needed to tell a really fine story. I enjoyed it immensely, and it didn't have a lot of overhead or cruft. You just did it. You got in there. I would happily go back to it over and over again. It has that feeling of a small one-session game that you could play a lot of sessions of and never feel tired of it. The other perfect little gem was Neon City Overdrive. This is a cyberpunk game fast playing, get it to the table. It again has, you make a few choices, it's exactly the color you need, and it does a really great job of delivering an epilogue for your character. And it really felt cyberpunky, and it really felt like it moved fast, and that was a great game. Another one of my honorable mentions, not a small one, iHunt. But like Shane, I love the commentary, and I love the attitude, and it was just a ton of fun to play. And again, I could see going back to it over and over again, and really enjoyed iHunt. But the other thing is there was sort of inadvertent theme to the games that I was playing. I played a ton of Forged in the Dark games. Started the year out with Brinkwood, which is an excellent game. Brinkwood, Blood of Tyrants, and the two other games, Brinkwood Refuge and Brinkwood Despair. Amazing. Brinkwood itself is out. The Blood of Tyrants is out. You can get it. It is a strong game, and it's out there in the wild. It pits the players as Fey rebels fighting against well-established, powerful vampire lords. The price is really heavy, so the game kind of leans into rotating characters who wear powerful masks to help them succeed. It's the masks that tend to afford the continuity in the game. So we played that, and because we used Brinkwood Refuge, we didn't have to swap the characters out as much, which was nice. But still, we could always see that we were just on the edge of doing that. And Brinkwood Despair really brought like good underpinnings of what the actual tragedy was, the prices that were paid, and made everything that we did that much more necessary, and what we lost so much more precious seeming. So that was an awesome game. But again, it was Blades in the Dark, and you're just seeing things coming out of new designers who are hitting that system, and they're building in more things to it, more sense of what that cycle of play can do, and how to structure it for the players to keep interest and to make it challenging in different ways and rewarding in different ways. Also this year, I got to play Hunter's Code, which is an in-play test by Sam Zimmerman. It's a version that goes for the lighter tone of Monster Hunter, and it adds in a system for replacing coin with loot and treasure that's really delightful, but best of all, really leans into collaborative setting building. And because of that, all the players are absolutely on board with what the world is like and what they're doing in it and what they want to do. Every one of those sessions was an unmitigated joy, and I'm super hopeful that Sam will get a beta version of it out in 2022 so you all can see it and bring this to your table. Maybe if it's your table's MO, you will have just as much fun as we did, because boy, was that a great game. And then, of course, my heart, The Twilight Throne and the House of Ruin. I enjoyed this game so much. So it's a game of intrigue, it's blades, but it feels like intrigue. You get to be clever. Flashbacks help a lot, if you're me. And you really want to get in over your head. These promises, the oaths power you. They just essentially they give you the triumphs, and they take you to your doom. Well, that and your curses. So you've got a lot of things going on as a character, but you've also got a lot of things going on with your house. It is a Baroque setting that you make, again, in collaboration, but based on the thematics of the game as is. And it is full of all kinds of delicious themes to pluck and use for your purposes. It has so many kinds of wonderful in it, and I imagine that there's going to be a beta in 2022. I'm hoping.
Yeah, so, almost there.
Yeah, keep an eye out for it. It's worth it. Again, in beta, just go take a look. No skin off your nose whatsoever. But for Game of the Year, I think I went with my runner-up is Manistana. Why This Night is Different. Again, like other people have played it, it is a game that just stays with you. I have not stopped thinking of it fondly and a little wistfully since I played it. If a game can create a feeling of family in a single play, this one may be it. I love you, and I am so proud of you every time I see your names, Lyra, Danielle, and Jamie. I literally tear up thinking of the people that I played with in that game. It's not just an emotional game. It is such a wise and thoughtful demonstration of the power of storytelling and of perspective, and of the power and the powerlessness of love. It is something that there's just so many levels of depth to think about in it. And I really love it, and it's in beta, and you can go look at it in itch.io, and you should. I think when it rolls out in its finished form, it's going to be magnificent. But for my game of the year, I had to go with, and let's face it, I played a ton of Forge in the Dark. I played a lot of other games. But the thing that I played the most of and loved every minute of was Hearts of Wulin in all of its incarnations and all of its hacks. The Supernatural playbooks and the Academy of the Blade playset and the detective hacks have kept that game feeling fresh and new. And every time I play it, it just surprises me with how much I enjoy myself, how much it feels right in the moment at every moment in the game. I can't deny it. For me, the game I played the most consistently was in my element, Hearts of Wulin.
Awesome. That is a great pick there you got for that last one. That's quite nice.
Oh, yeah. I didn't really consider that. Yeah. Oh, well, anyway, it is a really good game.
Listeners, we're going to hear from some more community members and their picks.
Hey, Rach.
Hey, Rich.
We snuck on again.
See, they really got to lock that back door because
No, they don't need the back door is fine. Only the right people know that it's unlocked.
So we're here for our annual screening of the Star Wars Holiday Special that is absolutely part of the Gauntlet Holiday End of Year podcast, right? That's what we're here for.
Wait.
I brought my Wookiee cosplay and everything.
We're supposed to talk about the favorite game of the year instead.
All right. So it's been a really weird year, right?
It has.
We said that last year too, right?
Right. One of these days it will be less weird. That was not this year. Let's get to it. Because I, being the producer and editor of the Gauntlet podcast, know that there are a lot of entries. A lot of folks jumped in with their favorite games of the year. So let's get to it. Do you want to go first, Rach, or do you want me to jump in?
Sure. Let's keep it as clean as possible and to save you some editing time. Now, favorite game of the year does not necessarily mean favorite game that was released in 2020, right? Or 2021. God, what year is it even? Oh, God.
What even are years?
Yes, what are years is the new what are games.
Yeah, does it have to be a game released in 2021?
Okay, so let me get you with this one. I'm going to be a jerk, and not only am I going to bring up a game that has been released, but one that will be released. A quantum game stuck in a perpetual state of being and unbeing. Is that appropriate for podcasting?
In Plus One Forward, we try to avoid quote-unquote vaporware games, but this is for the Gauntlet, where they will feature a game that was play-tested with 5 people and is not publicly available to anyone, no matter how cool it sounds. So I think it's legit.
All right. My game of 2021 is Apocalypse Keys.
Interesting.
It's a kind of a quantum game, Schrodinger's game, as you would. It's a game that I believe was on sale for a period of time, but it has since been taken down now that it has been picked up for publication by Evil Hat. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the current state of things.
I know I got a preview of it in Jamie's Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it was definitely a thing that was out, and then Evil Hat snatched it up and created a playtest. Yeah, so I see what you mean now.
Yeah, and I think Evil Hat was really smart in terms of snatching it up, as we will discuss, and why it is my favorite game and a very interesting game that listeners should be excited for. On the surface level, it's an urban fantasy game that wants to take ideas from Belonging Outside Belonging and drag them kicking and screaming back to Powered by the Apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
That admittedly doesn't explain much of anything. But what I think is most interesting about this game is the type of character arcs it wants to explore and the themes associated with those characters. The easiest way I could explain how the game makes me feel is adult Monster Hearts, but not necessarily playing around with the same themes as Monster Hearts. I might need to expand this a little bit more.
Yeah. Come on, tease it out.
An Apocalypse Key party is usually a cast of characters of supernatural creatures with complicated relationships to each other, but who are also individually grappling with themes of doom and destiny, questioning what meaning a person leaves once their time on Earth is over. Contrast this with Monster Hearts, which also uses supernatural creatures, in this case as a metaphor for teenage development. Part of the journey there is about how players address their flaws and shortcomings and then grow up into adulthood and sort of overcome those and gain wisdom from overcoming the challenges. So I really feel like Apocalypse Keys is hitting that emotionally intense space, but not necessarily going juvenile, as it were, and that this is not a mark against Monster Hearts. I love Monster Hearts. I think Monster Hearts is a beautiful piece of work. It's a beautiful piece of art, but it is not a story about adults that it's telling.
No.
But I think Apocalypse Keys can be.
That's a very interesting take.
And I know adult Monster Hearts is an idea that designers have been toying with, where they sit down, they play Monster Hearts, they realize, I love this energy, I love these dynamics between characters, but what if we were adults instead of teenagers? And I don't think Apocalypse Keys will eventually replace Monster Hearts, and it might not be the specific Monster Hearts any given player might be looking for, but I do think it might be an option some players are looking for and will fit in the pantheon of PBTA urban fantasy games about adults like Urban Shadows and Monster of the Week, although occupying a slightly different space.
Very cool.
So, Rich, how about you? Tell me your favorite game of this year.
I've got to go with Bounty of the Week. This is a game I've talked about before. It's a Monster of the Week game that I've hacked for Star Wars. I've had a great time running. I ran this game for a couple months. I'm going to be running it in January on a Twitch stream, the actual play Twitch stream, and I'm very excited about that. And what I like about Bounty of the Week this year has been the additional playbooks that we've created, the continuing hack that it is, the conversation between Will, David, MK, and I as we just take this game, we run it for a little bit, we shave off some edges, we add a few bits, and then we pass it. It's like this exquisite corpse game that keeps passing around between us. We've got this Google Doc that grows and changes, and like this week I renamed the Crooked into the Scoundrel because I'm like, that feels more Star Warsy to me.
No, it does. It definitely does.
And Will said, yeah, that's not bad, I'll take that. And so I took the Constructed, which is this extended playbook that Michael Sands, I believe, had created for Monster of the Week, and I made it into the Droid. And it's just all these little things that I'm constantly touching, retouching. I'm looking at all kinds of other games to come up with ideas for, oh, here's a retirement move. Here's how we can do the mechanics for money. And then Will takes it and he goes, I want to add a ship in and I want to strip off this other piece because I want to drive harder onto credits being why you do the job, but also being hard to accumulate like you can in, say, Blaze in the Dark. So that continuing design and play and design cycle has been super duper fun for me. My favorite game of 2021.
Amazing. And I do think it's a good choice because of all the time we've hung out and talked about gaming, in my mind, that is the one you talk about the most. You're like, you wouldn't believe what happened this week. It's amazing.
Yeah, sometimes I've taken up some of our Scum and Villainy game sessions with regaling you of Bounty of the Week stuff that I get geeked out about. It's fun.
And then we have to like share links to Wikipedia to the other players so they know what we're talking about.
Indeed. Well, Rach, thanks for sneaking in the back door so we could get on this Gauntlet episode. I appreciate it.
Okay, now we got to get out before we get caught.
And we're back. This is the last of the hosts. This is Lowell. And this is hard. I will admit, this is very hard. I counted out 28 different games that I played this year. And like Jamie, I tried to throttle back, and for about 6 months I did, but not entirely successfully. So I want to talk about, like the others have done, some runners-up that really impacted me and made me think about things. At the start of the year, I did a series of Night's Black Agents with an express version that took a little bit from the Yellow King for the investigative skills and then PBTA'd up the action resolution. The hack itself needs work, it needs tweaks, but the game was really fun. It was a solid game. We had done kind of a prologue series and it rolled into it, so it ended up being like 16 sessions. And two of the PCs died at the very end. It was really good. Like, it was solid. Nice Black Agents is a fun setting. Alan took where we left off on that and ran a series of Against the Vampiric Conspiracy that was also a pleasure and tied into that. It was very neat, and it got me rewatching a lot of spy stuff and thinking about what a spy game, which was a classic genre when I was growing up with James Bond and stuff, how different that is today, the implications of it. Second thing is I did an experiment with a month of world-building games where we did a session of Microscope and built a history, and then we did a little game that I wrote up about making up a tarot or divinatory card deck in that same world, and that was pretty fun. I enjoyed that quite a bit. And then we did a couple of sessions of Kingdom in that same setting, and it was very fun. I think there's a lot more space for doing like connected world building things. I know Patrick and Tyler, I've talked to them, they've been doing those kinds of games to enhance their existing campaign. They've been doing those things with Ars Magica, like they're doing a version of like Little Wizards with a pillion to do like little junior wizards in their Ars Magica covenants. There's lots of great stuff there. I should have put a map making game in that series, and I realized that only afterwards. 3, for another thing that I ran a bunch of masks this year, and I really like it. I did a couple of tweaks with it. One of them I did where it was masks in setting where everything had gone terribly wrong, and I let the players figure out what went wrong, and they still romanced it all up. And then I did a year 1 where players had to play existing characters from Marvel or DC or whatever, and a kind of teen year 1 version. That has legs, and I want to do that again. I had a really good time with it. And then a game I thank the gods that I didn't have to run, but I really enjoyed, is Red Markets, which is a game of economic horror that Will H. ran, and it is hard. It is tough. It is resource tracking and lots of Bitly stuff, the kinds of things that I normally wouldn't be into. But it was tense and fun, and when I'm tracking every bullet, when I'm tracking my food, when we're running up against it, it was a whole set of pressure, plus the underlying horror of the economic universe that you're trapped in. Where iHunt has that economic horror, but we're against it, and we get pushed down and stuff. Red Markets, that is everything. The world is against you, the system is against you, and zombies are just part of what has caused it. But everything else is the economic system. It was really good, but really more rules resolution and systems than I'm comfortable with, and Will did a great job of running it. So it was a delight. My runner-up is a game I might have picked for my game of the year, but I wrote it, so I would feel really...
You can pick your game as game of the year, though. It's a good game.
I'm not going to, but I will say I got a lot of good series out of Heart of William this year. The Academy of the Blade, the weird school stuff there. I ran several one-shots for our Gauntlet Community Open Gaming of wedding scenarios that all ended up wonderful and tragic and terrible. And my sort of hack, matching it up with Brindlewood Bay, has been a delight doing the mystery games. There's a lot of wuxia dramas that use mystery, and we've been playing that out and tweaking that, and that has been just a joy. And Hearts of Wilderness paid off in spades, and I have a bunch of ideas for more hacks and things, I got to admit, for 2022. We might even do a game jam on the Gauntlet that I might sneakily theme over for that, but we'll figure that out. But I want to talk about my actual pick. I run a lot of games, and a lot of games I go into, do a little bit of prep, plan out, we get to play, and it's fun. I have a good, satisfying arc, and I feel good about it, and I feel energized. Usually, that's my usual thing. Some of the games I get tense over when I'm not feeling like it's clicking or things are a little bit out of hand for me. The game I'm picking is being picked because the 4 sessions that I ran of it were solid from start to finish. It was a pleasure to run. The mechanics of it played off. The players were great. The mystery I was working from was dynamite, and it's not out yet, but Apocalypse Keys fucking rocks. I loved every moment of those sessions that I ran. I enjoyed everything that was set up in the module. Every time I got to throw to the players, it was good. The weird interaction stuff we were getting with Jamie playing our Dorian Gray character and our sort of John Constantine that Josh was playing, and Sherry's just strange trying to keep things together. There was all kinds of threads and details and things that played out. The first session, we got to set up all these weird things about what does the base look like, and we did some of the preliminary things. I'm vaguing around it, but the library mystery that's there was so good. Yeah. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, you were running Circe, Sherry. Yeah, with the whole idea about having sent all the Greek gods on, but you were left behind. And in fact, one of the hard move revelations was that you had been deliberately left behind.
Oh yeah, that was so good. Yeah.
Oh, so good. There's so much stuff to play with. It was great. Like every session I ran, that was great. And my biggest regret is that I managed to blow away the recordings of the first 2 playtest sessions. I so mad at myself about that. But yeah, Apocalypse Keys is great.
Oh my gosh.
It's dynamite. It will be coming out. And the newest version is a delight. It's rich and thick and meaty and everything I want out of a game. So yeah, that's my game of the year. Favorite game of the year.
Oh, I feel like we should give a shout out to Josh Hitty, who wrote the mystery that we played, which is the Parasitic Library. It's really good. I can't wait for people to... I didn't know Lo was going to choose Apocalypse Keys, so I'm like here trying to not cry. Thank you, Lo.
Listeners, that's our show. Our favorite games of the year collected from our 5 hosts. I do want to say a few things about the Gauntlet. I'm the Gauntlet community manager. Gauntlet Gaming Community is an online gaming community, online gaming club. You can find out more about that at gauntlet-rpg.com. You can come and sign up and play in our online games. If you're someone from a marginalized community, women, POC, a non-male, however you self-define that, or suffering financial hardship, we also have a program called the Gauntlet Gameway to give you priority RSVP status. You can find out about that on the site. We have our Gauntlet Community Open Gaming event that's coming up in March, the end of March, where we do a bunch of games that are free. And if you haven't tried online games or haven't tried online games with us, you can come and do that. We like to see new people, and we want to support the community. We've got a number of community goals this year for things like Game Jam, for things like doing playtesting, for more panels, that kind of thing. But that's my spiel. I feel obliged to do that once a year as the community manager. David, Shane, Jamie, Sherry, thank you all so much for coming on and doing this recording.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was both the toughest and most fun episode. It was so hard to pick a favorite.
Excruciating.
And so exciting to hear everyone else's favorites.
Yeah.
The treat is Rich gets to know who has picked everything at this point, but we won't know until we hear the whole long, big broadcast. And so it makes it a delight at the end of the year to listen to that. Listeners, that's our show. Thank you so much for playing with us. You can find out more about the Gauntlet at www.gauntlet-rpg.com, where you can find articles, podcast info, and links to our forums. You can follow us on Twitter at GauntletRPG. If you're interested in playing with the Gauntlet, do check out our forums or check out our Patreon. That supports everything that we do, including this. It's always nice to have that support. You can find out about that at patreon.com/gauntlet. Remember, the hard part is spelling Gauntlet right. Thank you, everybody, and that is our show. Listeners, we want to let you know that Hearts of Wulin, our PBTA game of wuxia melodrama, is now available as a PDF on DriveThruRPG. Hearts of Wulin emulates films like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and Shadow, and TV series like The Untamed and Ancient Detective. It is inspired by the Chinese martial arts novels of Jin Yong and Gu Long and their many adaptations. In these tales, romance is as dangerous as a blade. You can buy Hearts of Wulin at the Gauntlet store on DriveThruRPG. You can find more information and resources for it on our Gauntlet blog, on the Gauntlet webpage at gauntlet-rpg.com.